Since the dawn of creation, when the first stars ignited the velvet sky and the breath of the divine swept across the void, a sacred order was born, beings woven of light, guardians of the unseen paths between heaven and earth. They are the silent sentinels, the unseen watchers, the radiant warriors who walk beside us in shadows and storms. They are the guardian angels. Long before mortals walked the earth, these celestial beings stood at the edge of eternity, sworn to a vow no human ear could hear, to protect, to guide, to awaken the divine spark within every soul. When a child is born, they draw near. When danger whispers, they shield. When hearts break, they whisper hope. Yet who are they, truly? Messengers or protectors? Guides or warriors? Do they weep with us in sorrow, rejoice in our victories, or fight battles for our souls in realms beyond our sight? Are they mere myth, or the hidden truth behind every miracle? This tale is not of fantasy alone. It is of a reality older than time and deeper than the stars. In a world of chaos and uncertainty, one question lingers in the silence between each heartbeat. Are we ever truly alone, or are we forever protected? Let the veil be lifted. Enter the realm of the guardian angels. Come, traveler, leave behind what you think you know. Open your spirit and listen, for the guardians are near, and they have a story to tell. Chapter 1. The First Light. Before the stars were sewn across the canvas of night, before time wore its name, there was light. It was not the light of the sun, nor the flame of fire, but a radiance that breathed purpose into the void. From that eternal brightness came the firstborn of heaven, beings woven from song and thought, fierce and serene. Among them were the guardians. They did not descend with trumpets or triumph. They emerged in stillness, eyes wide with the wonder of their purpose. Each was given a soul to watch over, a single spark in the grand sea of creation. And though they were legion, each bond was unique, sacred. One such guardian was Oriel. Oriel had watched the cosmos swirl into being. He had sung with the stars and danced across nebulae. But it was Earth, raw, chaotic, beautiful Earth, that caught his gaze. And there, in the dust of beginnings, he felt his first tether. Her name was Leora. She was not remarkable in the eyes of men, just a child in a cradle woven of reeds, born to a family of wandering shepherds. But to Oriel, she was a universe. Her soul shimmered with the potential of 1,000 lifetimes. He stood by her in silence, invisible to all but heaven. As she grew, Oriel learned the language of humanity, not through words, but through her laughter, her tears, her questions whispered to the stars. She could not see him, not yet, but sometimes she paused mid-prayer, a strange warmth in her chest, as if someone were listening. And someone was. But the path of a guardian is never simple. For as light gives life, so too does shadow stir. In the depths of forgotten realms, another presence began to awaken. A whisper slithered through the veil, a force ancient and hungry, not for flesh but for despair. It had no name, only hunger. It watched Leora too, and thus began the silent war. Oriel stood at the edge of dreams, sword of will drawn not in violence, but in vigilance. He could not force her path. That was the law. But he could illuminate the way, cast light upon the stones, and shield her from what sought to claim her soul in sleep. As the sun rose over the hills of her youth, and Leora took her first step toward destiny, the heavens held their breath. For though she did not know it, she was chosen, and her guardian had already sworn never to leave her side. Chapter 2. The Veil of Dreams. Night fell over the valley like a velvet curtain, speckled with stars that blinked with secrets. The world quieted, and within the hush, another world stirred. Leora lay asleep beneath a canopy of woven branches, her breath slow and peaceful. But her mind wandered far from the shelter of her resting place. She entered the veil, the space between waking and eternity, where thoughts become shapes and fears take form. Here, in the land of dreams, Oriel was most present. He walked beside her, cloaked in golden mist, his wings brushing gently against the fabric of her illusions. She did not see him with her eyes, but she felt him like a memory she had not lived, like warmth in winter or a lullaby from childhood. In the Veil, guardians move freely. They fight without being seen. They mend what would break. But tonight the dream shifted. Leora wandered through a forest of glass trees, each one humming with notes only souls could hear. The branches bent toward her, curious, welcoming. She reached out, her fingers brushing a shard of light, and suddenly the melody turned cold. A wind howled. The trees grew taller, sharper, their trunks blackened like scorched bone. Shadows slithered at the edges of her vision, murmuring words she could not understand. Her heartbeat quickened. Oriel stepped closer. Then the shadow came. It was not a beast nor a man, but a shape, a figure formed of dripping silence and broken thoughts. It had eyes like forgotten graves and a smile too wide for any face. It reached for Leora. Oriel's wings unfurled with thunder. He raised his hand, and a light burst forth, not blinding, but pure, like the echo of creation. The shadow recoiled, hissing, its form unraveling in strands of smoke. It was not destroyed. No guardian could destroy shadow, but it was driven back. For now, Leora shivered, then awoke. She sat up in her bed of leaves, heart pounding, eyes wide in the dark. Around her, the world was calm, the stars untroubled. But within her, a question lingered. Was it just a dream? Oriel stood at her side, invisible, vigilant. She has felt the breath of the enemy, he whispered to the night. It begins. Above them, the stars flickered, and far across the celestial divide, other guardians turned their gaze toward Earth. For when one child begins to see, others soon follow. And the war for the soul of the world begins not with armies, but with a whisper in the night. Chapter 3. Wings in the Wind. The days passed, as days always do, quietly at first, then with a rhythm that builds like a heartbeat. Leora grew older, and with each year, the veil between her soul and the unseen world thinned. She began to notice things. The way the wind would stir only when she wept. How the flames of the hearth would leap higher when she felt joy. She caught glimpses, barely more than flickers, of something watching her. Not in menace, but in love. A love so ancient it made her bones tremble. She was not alone, and though she dared not say it aloud, in the chambers of her soul, she began to believe. Oriel moved like a current of divine breath, weaving signs into the fabric of her life. A bird's sudden cry to lead her away from danger. A stranger's words that echoed her own secret prayers. Even the stars seemed to shift when she looked up, aligning in silent approval. But the enemy watched too. The shadows had names now, not spoken in the world of men, but in the hush of forgotten places. Mermiel, the doubter. Veshra, the tempter. And beyond them, the hollow king, a presence that had never truly fallen because it had never sought to rise. They did not attack. Not directly. They whispered. One night, as Leora wandered the hills alone, her thoughts heavy with sorrow, she heard a voice, not loud, but persistent. It came from within, yet not of her. It told her she was alone, that her prayers were echoes, unanswered, that the warmth she felt was only her own imagination. She knelt, tears streaking her cheeks. Oriel stood just behind her, his hand outstretched. He could not force belief. That was the law, but he could speak. So he did, through the rustle of the grass, through the soft beating of her heart, through a sudden gust that swept her hair like a kiss from the divine. You are not forsaken, the wind seemed to say, and she heard it. She rose, slowly, her eyes wet but bright. She looked into the empty sky and whispered, I know you're there. Oriel closed his eyes. The bond between them, fragile and sacred, shimmered. Far above, other guardians stirred. For when a soul begins to listen, the heavens take notice. The war between light and shadow deepens, and even angels must prepare for storms. For not all who wear wings serve the light. Chapter 4. The Tempter's Call. The world shifted, and with it, so did Leora's heart. The winds that had once whispered love now carried shadows, soft murmurs that filled her nights with doubt. She could no longer deny that something dark pressed against the edges of her spirit. It was as though the very air had changed, thickening with unseen weight. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, a figure appeared at the edge of her vision. At first, she thought it was the flicker of a tree, the play of light on the horizon. But as the figure drew nearer, it became clearer. An elegant man, dressed in a cloak of midnight blue that shimmered with starlight. His smile was gentle, his eyes kind, yet there was something in his gaze that unsettled her, something ancient, something that knew too much. "Are you lost, child?" he asked, his voice smooth like velvet, but with a hidden edge that only she could hear. Leora paused, feeling the pull of something familiar, yet strange. "No, I'm not lost," she replied, though the words felt uncertain. The man stepped closer, his presence warm, as though the evening air itself had wrapped him in its embrace. "Ah, but perhaps you seek more than what the world offers," he said, his gaze turning toward the stars. "Perhaps you long for answers that the heavens do not share." Leora's heart quickened. The temptation was subtle, a gentle pull on her soul, a suggestion that she had not yet found the truth she sought. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The world is full of mysteries," the man said, his smile widening. "But there is one mystery that none will ever tell you. Why do you believe the things you do? Why follow the path of faith when there are other roads? Roads that promise power, understanding, freedom. You are a child of the stars, and yet you kneel to those who tell you to believe in their way. Why not carve your own?" The words settled into her mind like seeds in fertile soil. She had never questioned the beliefs passed down to her. She had never thought to doubt the warmth of faith she had always known. But now the idea was planted, and the whisper in her heart grew louder. "You speak of freedom," she said, her voice trembling. "But at what cost?" The man's smile turned dark, his eyes glittering like obsidian. "Freedom comes at no cost, but your willingness to see beyond the veil. You have power within you, Leora. You are meant to do more than merely follow." As the words sunk deeper, a coldness began to wrap around her chest. Her breath came faster, her mind racing. There was no answer, no clarity in his words, only shadows, laced with promises. Oriel stood at the edge of her vision, watching, his wings folding tight against his back. He could not intervene. This was her trial, her test of faith. He could not choose for her, but he could offer a reminder, a soft beacon of truth. Leora's gaze flickered toward the heavens, toward the stars that had always whispered her name. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, and when she opened them again, she saw him. The man who had offered freedom now seemed distant, as if he were fading into the night. The shadows tried to hold her, to pull her toward him, but she felt the warmth of the divine light rise in her soul like a wave. "You are not alone," she whispered. The figure before her vanished, leaving only the night. Oriel stepped closer, his presence like the breath of dawn. The tempter is never far. He will come again. But Leora, her heart steady now, nodded. "I'm not afraid." And so, the battle for her soul continued. For the road of the faithful was not an easy one. It was marked with temptations, doubts, and dark whispers. But every choice made in light was a step toward strength, and every refusal to surrender was a victory. Chapter 5: The Hollow King. Leora's life continued, shaped by the echoes of the darkness that brushed against her soul. As the seasons turned and the years drifted by, she found herself standing at the crossroads of destiny, a place where the light seemed dimmer and the shadows grew longer. The whispers were always there, lingering in the back of her mind, but it was not the tempter's voice that now called to her. No, this was something far older, far more ancient, something that had never truly left, but waited in silence for the right moment to strike. The Hollow King. He had no name, no form. He was not a creature of flesh and bone, but an idea, a void that consumed all light, all hope, all joy. His influence was not immediate, like the tempter's, but slow, insidious. He whispered not of power or freedom, but of despair. Leora felt his pull the night she lost her closest companion, a friend, a brother in spirit, who had walked by her side since childhood. He had been struck down by an illness, a sickness that no healer could cure. And as he lay dying, he looked into her eyes, and with his last breath, he said the words that would forever haunt her. Perhaps there is no meaning after all. The Hollow King's voice echoed in her heart. Leora had spent so many years seeking answers, praying for understanding, for peace. But now, standing over the body of the one she loved, she felt only emptiness. The world seemed less vibrant, the stars less bright, and the warmth she had once known felt distant, faded. It was in that moment of grief, when her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, that the Hollow King stepped closer. He did not appear as a figure, not at first. Instead, he took the shape of a thought, a fleeting idea that slithered through the cracks in her spirit. His voice was soft, like the rustling of leaves in a dying forest. "What is the point of all this?" he whispered. "You seek answers, but none will come. Life is but a fleeting dream, and all that you love will slip through your fingers like sand. There is no meaning to be found. The heavens are silent. The gods do not hear. Your faith is just a lie." The words struck her like a blow. For the first time, she questioned everything she had believed. Was it all a story? A dream? Had she been deceived all along? Was there truly nothing beyond the veil? And yet, even as the Hollow King's darkness filled her thoughts, she felt something stir deep within her. A spark, a tiny flame that refused to be extinguished. Oriel's voice, distant but clear, broke through the void. "You are not alone," he whispered, "and you are not forgotten." Leora turned her gaze upward, her eyes red from crying, her heart heavy with sorrow. But there, amidst the sorrow, she saw a flicker of light, tiny but unwavering. For the Hollow King could take many forms. He could take away love, hope, and joy. But he could not take away the one thing that no shadow could ever possess: faith. The Hollow King's influence waned, his whispers growing quieter as she stood tall in the face of despair. She knew that the darkness would return again and again, that would never fully leave her. But in this moment, she had chosen to stand in the light. "I will not give in," she said softly, her voice steady now. "I will not let the darkness win." And with that declaration, the Hollow King retreated into the shadows, for he could not thrive where the light burned brightest. But the battle was not over. Not yet. Oriel stood by her side, unseen but ever present. "You are stronger than you know," he said, his voice a quiet reassurance. "The road ahead will not be easy, but you are not alone. You never have been." And so, Leora continued on her journey, a journey of light and shadow, of faith and doubt, but always with the knowledge that no matter the trials ahead, she was never truly alone. Chapter 6. The Path of the Serpent. As Leora's journey unfolded, the world seemed to change around her. The shadows that once merely whispered now grew louder, pressing in with greater force. The Hollow King's influence had not disappeared entirely. He lurked in the corners of her mind, sowing seeds of doubt, but she had learned to recognize his voice and turn from it. Yet, with each step she took toward the light, she encountered new trials, new tests of her faith, new dangers that sought to claim her spirit. One day, as she walked along a narrow trail that wound through a dense forest, a new presence appeared. It was subtle at first, just a flicker in the underbrush, a rustle in the trees. But soon, the air itself grew heavier, charged with something that felt both ancient and unclean. Leora stopped, her heart racing, and turned to face the source of the disturbance. A serpent, long and dark, coiled around the base of a tree, its eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence. Its scales shimmered with an iridescent sheen, reflecting the light in unnatural hues. The serpent's gaze locked onto hers, and in that moment, she felt an overwhelming pull, a temptation to follow it, to abandon the path she had chosen and listen to the seductive promises it offered. The serpent did not speak with words, but with an unspoken knowledge that slithered into her mind like a virus. "You seek the truth, child?" it asked, its voice curling around her thoughts. "But truth is not what you think it is. You have suffered, haven't you? The world has taken from you, taken your loved ones, your peace, your joy. Why continue the struggle?" The serpent's tongue flickered, and Leora's mind was flooded with images, memories of pain, loss, and unanswered prayers. It showed her the faces of those she had lost, the moments when she had felt abandoned by the very heavens she had once trusted. "The world is not kind," the serpent continued, "but I can offer you a path, a way to avoid the suffering that awaits you. I can show you the true nature of the universe, a place where you can control your own destiny. All you need to do is listen." Leora's chest tightened as the serpent's words sank deep into her soul. A part of her wanted to surrender, to let go of the fight and embrace the power the serpent promised. The idea of controlling her own fate, of never facing the pain of loss again, was tempting. But then she felt it, the faintest touch, like a breeze on her skin, a reminder of something greater. Oriel. He was there, standing at the edge of her perception, his wings unfurled, his presence like a distant star. He did not speak, but his presence was enough. It reminded her of the light she had once known, of the strength she had called upon in times of darkness. The serpent's promises seemed hollow in comparison, like a shadow cast over the true brilliance of the divine. Leora stepped back, her feet steady, her heart resolute. The serpent's gaze flickered with annoyance, and it hissed as it slithered closer, its body shifting like liquid darkness. "You would choose suffering over power?" it whispered, its voice dripping with disdain. "Foolish child, you could have everything you desire." But Leora's eyes were clear now. She stood tall, her heart unwavering, and she spoke with a quiet strength that came from deep within her soul. "I choose truth, not illusion," she said softly, but with conviction. "I choose light, not shadow." The serpent recoiled, its body twisting and writhing in fury. "Then you will never know peace," it hissed, its voice fading as it disappeared into the underbrush, leaving only the echo of its words behind. Leora stood in the silence that followed, her heart pounding. She felt the weight of the temptation lift, but it left her with a new understanding, a realization that the path she had chosen was not one of simple answers, but one of continuous choice. Oriel's voice echoed in her mind, gentle but firm. "The road of the faithful is not easy, but it is true, and the trials you face will only make you stronger. Remember this, Leora, it is not the absence of darkness that makes the light shine, but the presence of light within it." She nodded, her resolve solidified. She was not alone. She never had been. The path before her stretched onward, winding through the forest, through the shadows, toward the unknown. And though she did not know what lay ahead, she knew that with each step, the light would guide her, if only she had the courage to walk in it. Chapter 7. The Veil of the Forgotten. Leora's journey grew more complicated with each passing day. The world around her, once vibrant and full of purpose, began to appear more uncertain. The shadows she had once resisted now felt like old friends, familiar and comforting in their quiet presence. And yet, with each step forward, a new part of her soul was awakening, growing stronger, clearer. She had learned that with every trial came a lesson, but this lesson would test her in ways she never imagined. One morning, as she walked through a valley thick with fog, she came upon an ancient temple hidden deep within the mountains. Its stone walls were weathered, covered with creeping ivy and moss, but still it stood, imposing and timeless. Leora felt an inexplicable pull, as though the temple had been waiting for her. Its entrance, half covered by vines, seemed to beckon her closer, whispering of secrets long forgotten. Stepping inside, she was met with silence, deep, haunting silence. The air felt thick, laden with ancient dust and forgotten prayers. The walls of the temple were etched with symbols, some familiar, others foreign, but all of them seemed to glow faintly with an otherworldly light. There was a feeling here, in this place, of being at the threshold of something important. Leora wandered through the vast halls, drawn to a room at the heart of the temple. Inside, a large stone altar stood, bathed in a strange, flickering light. As she approached, she noticed the carvings along the altar's edge, patterns that seemed to move as if alive. She ran her fingers over them, feeling the cool stone, and suddenly the room shifted. The air grew heavy, and she felt an overwhelming presence, as if the walls themselves were watching her. A voice, low and resonant, filled the space. "You seek knowledge, do you not?" Leora froze, her heart skipping a beat. The voice was not one she recognized, but it was familiar in some way, ancient, timeless. The voice of the temple itself. "Yes," she whispered, almost to herself. "I seek understanding. I seek the truth." The temple seemed to pulse with energy, as though it were alive, breathing with her. "The truth you seek is not the truth you desire," the voice said. "The answers you think you want will only bring more questions. But still, you may enter." With a deep breath, Leora stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the altar. The air around her thickened, and the carvings on the stone came to life, swirling, shifting into images that danced before her eyes. She saw flashes of faces, people she knew, people long gone, and others she had never seen before. Each one was filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed to reach into her very soul. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice trembling. "This is the veil of the forgotten," the voice replied. "It is a realm between worlds, a place where the lost things dwell, the memories, the truths that have been erased. Those who enter here seek answers, but the answers they find are often more terrifying than the questions." Leora's pulse quickened, her body tense. "What am I meant to find here?" The walls around her seemed to ripple, and the vision shifted. She saw herself, standing in a forest, alone, but not quite alone. Figures in the distance circled her, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They were not human, not entirely, and they were waiting. "They are waiting for you," the voice whispered. "The ones who walk between worlds. The ones who cannot die and yet cannot live. The guardians who have fallen." Leora gasped, her mind racing. She had heard of them, in stories, in hushed whispers. Angels who had chosen to forsake their divine purpose, their wings tattered by betrayal. She had never truly believed they existed. But here, in this place, the veil of the forgotten, she saw the truth. They were real, and they were waiting for her. "I do not understand," she said, trembling. "Understand this," the voice intoned, its echo reverberating in the air. "Your journey will take you beyond the living world, to a place where time has no meaning. There, you'll find the answers you seek. But remember, there is always a price for knowledge. Some things, once learned, cannot be unlearned, and some doors, once opened, cannot be closed." Leora stood still, her mind swirling with the magnitude of what she had just witnessed. Her heart ached, torn between the yearning for truth and the fear of what that truth might bring. But deep down, she knew that she could not turn back, not now, not when the path was clear before her, stretching into the unknown. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I will go." With those words, the veil shifted and the images faded, leaving Leora standing alone in the temple. The voice was gone, but the weight of its words lingered. The air had cleared, and the temple seemed quiet once more, as if the very walls were holding their breath. She stepped back, her heart heavy with the burden of what she had just discovered. The journey ahead would be unlike anything she had faced before, filled with dangers she could not yet understand. But she had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. Chapter 8. The Echo of the Fallen. The road ahead seemed more daunting now. The veil of the forgotten had revealed the shadows of her past, of those who had once walked the path of the angels, guardians who had fallen from grace. Leora felt the weight of their gaze, their ancient sorrow pressing in on her, as if they were silently watching her every move. But as the vision faded, it left her with more than just fear. It left her with a sense of purpose, of something far greater than herself. She now knew that her journey was not simply one of self-discovery, but a path intertwined with the very fabric of the universe, of the light and darkness that coexisted within it. The sun was setting as Leora continued on, the horizon painted with the soft hues of twilight. The path before her led into a dense forest, its trees towering like sentinels, their twisted branches reaching toward the sky as if beckoning her forward. Every step she took felt heavier, the air thick with an almost palpable tension. The shadows between the trees seemed to shift, moving with a life of their own. She knew she was not alone, and as if answering her unspoken thoughts, the first of them appeared, a figure draped in shadows, standing just beyond the tree line. Its form was tall and cloaked in a tattered black robe, its face hidden beneath a hood. The figure moved with unnatural grace, gliding through the forest as though it were one with the very darkness itself. Leora stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. This was no mere wanderer. This was one of them, one of the fallen. The figure stepped closer, and Leora could feel its eyes upon her, though its face remained hidden. There was no warmth, no compassion in the presence of the being before her. It was cold, distant, and yet somehow familiar. "You have come," the figure said, its voice low and smooth like velvet, but with an edge that sent a shiver down her spine. Leora's throat went dry as she stepped back, unsure of what to say. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head slightly, its movements slow and deliberate. "I am one who once stood in the light, but now I walk in the shadows. I was a guardian like you, or rather, like the one you seek to become." Leora's heart skipped a beat. The words were both unsettling and intriguing. "You were a guardian?" "Yes," the figure replied, its voice tinged with sorrow. "But we do not all remain as we were. There's a price for knowledge, child, and there is a price for disobedience." The figure's hand, pale and delicate, reached up to pull back its hood. Leora recoiled slightly as the figure's face was revealed, if it could be called a face at all. It was hollow, a featureless mask of white with dark, empty eyes that seemed to swallow all light. There was no expression, no humanity, only the cold, unfeeling emptiness of something that had once been alive but was now lost. "You seek to understand," the figure said, its voice now a whisper. "But can you bear the truth? Can you stand to know what we know, to see what we have seen? The fallen are not simply cast down. We chose this fate. We chose to fall." Leora's mind reeled with the implications of the words. "You chose to fall? Why?" "Because the truth is more than we could bear," the figure continued, stepping closer until it was only a few feet away. "We learned that the light we once served was not all it seemed. We discovered that the heavens we swore our allegiance to were not as pure as we believed. And in that knowledge, we found freedom. But with that freedom came a price." Leora could feel a coldness creeping into her soul as the figure's words settled into her heart. "What price?" she asked, barely able to speak. The figure's eyes gleamed with something like sadness. "The price of our wings. The price of our innocence. The price of our humanity. We fell not because we were cast out, but because we turned our backs on what we once were." The figure stepped back, its form becoming shrouded in shadow once more. "You have a choice, Leora," it said, its voice echoing in the emptiness around them. "You may continue on this path, seeking the light, but know this, there is darkness in that light. You will find what you seek, but the cost will be far greater than you imagine." Leora stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure was gone, fading into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her alone in the silent forest. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around her, and for a moment she could almost hear the whispers of the fallen calling to her from the depths of the shadows. With a deep breath, Leora closed her eyes and steadied herself. She had been warned, but she would not turn away. She had come this far, and she would not let fear stop her now. The road ahead was dark, but the light, however faint, still burned in her heart, and she would follow it no matter where it led. Chapter 9. The Heart of the Storm. Leora walked on, her mind swirling with the encounter she had just faced. The fallen, guardians who had turned away from their divine purpose, condemned to wander the shadows. The cold emptiness of their existence left a chill in her bones that no amount of daylight could dispel. They had chosen their path, and yet their warning echoed in her mind. There is darkness in that light. She had not come this far to turn back. The truth she sought had to be more than just a fleeting glimpse of light. It had to be something deeper, something pure, something that transcended the temptations of both light and dark. The road wound deeper into the forest, and the further Leora traveled, the more she felt the weight of the world pressing down upon her. The trees towered above her, their branches twisting in unnatural shapes, casting long, skeletal shadows across her path. The very air around her seemed to hum with a strange energy, an energy that felt alive, pulsing with ancient power. She knew she was approaching something important, something that would either break her or make her stronger. But as the world around her darkened, her heart grew more resolute. She had seen the light, and though it flickered at times, she would follow it. The forest opened up before her, revealing a vast, open clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a great stone circle, its stones weathered and ancient, covered in moss and lichen. The air was thick here, heavy with the weight of ages. Leora could feel the energy of the place, ancient and untamed, calling to her. At the center of the stone circle was an altar, a single stone slab, bathed in the light of the setting sun. The light cast long shadows, creating an eerie and surreal atmosphere that made Leora's pulse quicken. As she stepped closer, she could feel the pull of the altar, as if it were drawing her in, urging her to come closer. Her footsteps were slow, deliberate, as she reached the altar and placed her hands upon its surface. The moment her fingers made contact with the cold stone, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and the air around her seemed to crackle with energy. A low, rumbling sound echoed from deep within the earth, as if the very bones of the world were awakening. Leora's heart raced as the ground beneath her feet shook harder, the vibrations growing stronger. The sky above darkened, clouds swirling as though caught in a great storm. The wind howled through the trees, bending them in unnatural directions, and the forest around her seemed to tremble with the force of something ancient awakening. Her mind was filled with visions, flashes of light and darkness, of angels and demons, of creation and destruction. She saw the birth of the world and the fall of the divine. She saw the rise of kingdoms and their eventual collapse. She saw the lives of countless souls, their destinies intertwined in a web of fate that stretched across time and space. But among these visions, one image stood out, clearer than all the others. It was a figure, bathed in light, its face obscured by a crown of thorns, its body bruised and broken. The figure reached out to her, and she felt the overwhelming weight of its gaze. Its presence as heavy as the very earth itself. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, but the image of the figure remained burned into her mind. It was as if it had been calling to her, beckoning her towards something greater. Suddenly, the rumbling ceased, and the air around her fell still. The forest grew silent, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Leora stepped back from the altar, her heart pounding in her chest. What had just happened? Had she touched something sacred, something forbidden? But as the silence stretched on, she felt no fear. Instead, there was a calmness that washed over her, a sense of clarity. The visions, the storm, the presence, they were all part of the journey, part of the truth she sought. She had touched the heart of the storm, and she was still standing. The wind shifted, and with it came the faintest whisper, a voice, soft and distant, yet filled with power. It was a voice she had heard before, the voice of Oriel, the angel who had guided her thus far. "You have come far, Leora," the voice said, its tone filled with both pride and sadness. "But the journey is not yet complete. The storm you faced is but the beginning. There is more you must understand, more you must face." And the choices you make from here will determine not only your fate, but the fate of all things. Leora took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She knew she could not turn back. She had witnessed the truth of the world, the light, the darkness, the choices made by the divine and the fallen alike. She had touched the heart of the storm and survived. And now, there was no choice but to press on. She turned away from the altar, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. The journey would be long, and the trials would be great. But with each step she took, she knew she was growing closer to the truth. And no matter the cost, she would find it. Chapter 10. The Guardian's Trial. The path ahead was cloaked in an eerie stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Leora felt the weight of this silence, an oppressive force that seemed to press in on her from every direction. The visions of the stone's circle and the figure bathed in light still lingered in her mind, and the echo of Oriel's voice carried with it a promise and a warning. The choices you make from here will determine not only your fate, but the fate of all things. She wasn't sure what lay ahead, but she knew this was no longer just a journey of self-discovery. The world itself was at stake, and somehow, the angels, those who had once guarded the heavens, had become as much a part of her story as the fate of her own soul. The path narrowed as the forest began to grow dense again, the trees closing in around her. The air grew cooler, the ground softer underfoot, as the last remnants of twilight slipped away. She could hear the distant call of an owl, but beyond that, nothing. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, filling the spaces between the trees. Then, as if the forest itself had decided to challenge her, the earth beneath her feet trembled again, but this time it wasn't the soft rumbling of distant forces. This tremor was different. It was deliberate. It was a challenge. Before she could react, a figure appeared before her, standing in the middle of the path. The figure was tall and cloaked in armor that shimmered like moonlight. Its face was hidden beneath a helmet, but its presence was undeniable. It was as though the very air around it had solidified, becoming heavier, more oppressive. "You seek to understand," the figure said, its voice booming, reverberating through the trees and the very earth beneath Leora's feet. "But do you understand what you are asking for?" Leora stepped back, her heart racing. I don't know," she said, unsure of what this figure was or why it had appeared before her. The figure remained silent for a moment, as though weighing her words. Then it raised its hand and pointed toward her. "You're standing at the threshold of the final trial, the trial of a guardian. The path you choose here will decide whether you are worthy of the knowledge you seek, or if you will fall like those before you." Leora's breath caught in her throat. "A trial? I don't understand." The figure lowered its hand and stepped forward, the ground beneath its feet seeming to crack with each movement. "You seek answers, but the answers you seek are not easily given. The knowledge of the heavens is a burden as much as it is a gift. It comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it?" Leora swallowed hard, the weight of the figure's words sinking deep into her chest. The price. She had heard that before, first from the fallen, then from the vision of the storm. But what was this price? And was she truly willing to pay it? The figure stepped aside, revealing a stone archway hidden behind the trees. It was a grand arch, adorned with symbols and carvings that seemed to shift in the dim light, changing with each passing moment. The archway was both inviting and foreboding, as if it were the gateway to something both beautiful and terrible. "To pass through the archway," the figure said, "you must first face the trial within. Only those who are truly worthy may walk the path beyond." Leora's heart raced in her chest as she approached the arch. The air grew thicker as she crossed the threshold, her senses heightened as if she were stepping into another realm entirely. The light around her seemed to dim, and the forest behind her faded into darkness. Before her stood a vast, empty expanse. The ground beneath her feet was barren, cracked, and dry, stretching out as far as the eye could see. There was no sky, no horizon, only an endless void that seemed to swallow all color and sound. And then, from the darkness, shapes began to emerge, shadows taking form, shifting and twisting into familiar figures. Figures that Leora recognized from her journey. The fallen, the angels who had once stood by her side, their faces twisted in pain and regret. "You have come far," one of the shadows said, its voice hollow and mournful. "But are you ready to face what lies within yourself?" Leora's heart pounded in her chest as the shadows closed in around her, their voices whispering in her ears, echoing her doubts, her fears, and her regrets. She could feel the weight of their gaze, the pressure of their expectations, as if they were all waiting for her to make a choice. "Are you ready to choose?" one of the shadows asked. Leora's legs trembled, but she stood firm. The darkness around her seemed to close in, but she knew this was not the moment for fear. This was the trial she had been warned about. She had to face it. With a deep breath, Leora stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I am ready." The shadows seemed to waver, and the ground beneath her feet began to shift. The empty expanse stretched further, the cracks in the earth widening as though they were pulling her toward the void. But Leora did not hesitate. She pressed on, each step taking her further into the darkness. "Then face the truth," the shadows whispered, their voices now blending into one. Suddenly, Leora was no longer standing in the void. She was standing in a place she knew all too well, her childhood home. The walls were the same, the familiar warmth of the hearth filled the air. And yet it was all wrong. There was a coldness to the place, a stillness that was unnatural. She turned to find herself staring at a mirror, the reflection of her younger self standing before her. But it wasn't just a reflection. There was something else in the mirror, a shadow, a figure she could not recognize, but one that seemed to look back at her with an empty, hollow gaze. The figure raised a hand, and Leora's reflection mimicked the motion. But as she moved, the figure in the mirror did not. It stood still, watching her with eyes that were not her own. "You must face your own darkness," the figure said, its voice low and distorted. Leora's heart began to race. This was not just a trial of physical endurance. It was a trial of the mind, of the soul. The shadows were not just external forces. They were the parts of herself she had yet to confront. "You must choose," the figure repeated, its voice now echoing through her mind. "Will you remain in the light, or will you embrace the darkness within?" Leora felt a cold sweat on her brow as she stared into the reflection of herself. Her heart screamed with the uncertainty of it all. But then, she remembered the angels, the guardians who had fallen, the path she had chosen. She knew the only way to pass this trial was to accept both her light and her darkness. With a deep breath, she stepped toward the mirror, her hand reaching out to meet her reflection. Chapter 11. Embrace of the Shadows. As Leora's hand reached toward the mirror, her reflection twisted and contorted in unnatural ways. The face before her flickered like a flame, warping between who she had been and who she feared she might become. The figure in the mirror, the shadow that had once been her, reached back, its hand cold and unyielding. The moment her fingers touched the glass, the world around her shattered like brittle glass, fragments scattering into the void. She was no longer in her childhood home. The warmth of the hearth and the comforting familiarity of the place had vanished. Now, she stood in an endless expanse of darkness, surrounded by nothing but an abyss that stretched far beyond her reach. The mirror was gone, replaced by the oppressive weight of silence. But in the stillness, she could hear whispers, soft at first, like the wind rustling through trees, but growing louder. The whispers were her own thoughts, the doubts she had buried deep within herself, echoing in the void. "You are not worthy. You are weak. You will fail." Leora squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the voices, but they pressed in on her, filling her mind with fear and uncertainty. The darkness felt like it was closing in around her, suffocating her, as if the shadows themselves were alive, seeking to consume her. But then, in the midst of the overwhelming darkness, she remembered the words of the angel. You must face the truth. What was the truth? What was it that she had been running from all this time? The shadows around her began to shift, forming into shapes that were almost familiar, figures that seemed to be made of the very darkness that surrounded her. They stepped forward, their eyes glowing with an eerie light, their forms shifting and flickering like flames. "You have come far, Leora," one of the figures said, its voice a whisper of smoke. "But this is where the real trial begins. Will you accept what you see? Will you accept the darkness that dwells within you?" Leora's heart pounded in her chest. She had faced the darkness outside. Now she had to face the darkness within. But how could she embrace the very thing that terrified her the most? The figure's voice continued, its words seeping into her mind like poison. "The light you seek cannot exist without the shadow. You cannot separate the two. Without darkness, there is no light. Without fear, there is no courage." Leora clenched her fists, trying to steady her breath. She had always feared the darkness within her, the parts of herself she could not control, the parts that made her doubt, made her question her own worth. She had always believed that the light was something pure and perfect, something to be embraced while the darkness was to be rejected. But now, standing in the heart of this trial, she realized that the truth was not so simple. The darkness was a part of her, just as much a part of her as the light. And to truly understand both, she had to face them. She had to accept them. "I will not run anymore," Leora said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I will not reject what is a part of me." The shadows around her seemed to pause, as if considering her words. Then, slowly, they began to dissipate, dissolving into the air like smoke in the wind. The oppressive weight lifted, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Leora could breathe freely. The darkness, though still present, no longer held her captive. From the void emerged a new presence, one that was familiar, yet not. It was the figure she had seen in her vision, the one bathed in light, crowned with thorns. This time, there was no fear, no hesitation. The figure stood before her, its eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "You have chosen," the figure said, its voice gentle, yet resonant. "You have embraced both the light and the darkness within you. And now you are ready." Leora took a deep breath as the figure reached out toward her. It was not a touch of fear or uncertainty, but one of warmth and acceptance. The weight of the journey, the trials, the shadows, the moments of doubt had been necessary. They had forged her, shaped her into something stronger than she had been before. The figure's hand rested upon her shoulder, and in that moment, Leora understood. The trials were not just tests to overcome, but lessons that showed her the truth about herself, the truth about the world, and the truth about the balance between light and dark. "Remember," the figure said, its voice fading into the wind. "The guardians are not those who have never fallen, but those who rise again after the fall." With those final words, the figure vanished, leaving Leora standing alone in the vast, empty expanse. The air around her was still, calm, as if the world itself had exhaled. The trial was over, but the journey was far from finished. Leora turned, and in the distance, she could see the faintest glimmer of light. It was a beacon, guiding her forward toward the next part of her journey. She was ready. Chapter 12, The Path Forward. Leora's heart raced as she gazed at the distant light, its soft glow beckoning her forward. She could feel the pull, a quiet insistence that told her she was meant to follow it, even though she did not yet know what awaited her at its end. The air around her was still, the remnants of the darkness fading away like a dream slipping from memory. It was as if the void had never existed, as though the trial had never happened. Yet she knew it had, and it had changed her. With a steady breath, she began to walk, her footsteps light against the barren ground. The path stretched before her, winding and uncertain, but she no longer hesitated. She had faced the shadows, accepted the darkness within, and emerged stronger. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready. As she walked, the faint glow grew brighter, more defined, until she could make out the outline of a gate in the distance. It was massive, towering, crafted from stone that shimmered with an ethereal light. The gate was adorned with intricate carvings, symbols that Leora recognized, ancient symbols, some of which she had seen in her visions. They were the markings of the guardians, the protectors who had once stood watch over the balance of the heavens and earth. When Leora reached the gate, she stood before it for a moment, taking in the sight of it. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, the power of the gate almost palpable. It was as though it held within it the knowledge of all things, the secrets of the universe waiting to be unlocked. But the gate was not open. Leora stepped closer, her hand reaching out. But as her fingers touched the cold stone, a voice echoed in her mind. It was not her own voice, nor the voice of the angels. It was something deeper, something older. "You seek the truth," the voice said, its tone both distant and near, as if it were coming from the very earth beneath her feet. "But the truth is not given freely. To enter, you must prove yourself worthy." Leora's heart skipped a beat. She had passed the trial, embraced the darkness within, but now the true test awaited her. She had no choice but to face it. "How?" she whispered, though she knew no one was physically there. The voice, however, seemed to answer her anyway. "You must surrender the one thing you hold most dear," the voice said. "Only then will the gate open." Leora's breath caught in her throat. "The one thing I hold most dear?" For a moment, she stood frozen. What was it that she held most dear? Her memories? Her hopes? The journey she had undertaken? She thought of the fallen angels, of their suffering and their redemption, of the choices they had made. She thought of the guardians, the protectors of the souls, and how they had sacrificed everything for a greater purpose. And then, in that quiet, still moment, the answer came to her. The one thing she held most dear was not something that could be touched or held. It was something within her, something that defined who she was, her belief in the light, the hope that had carried her through every trial. Her faith. Leora closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle within her. The light she had embraced, the light of the angels, the light of the guardians, was part of her, but it was not all that she was. To truly pass through the gate, she had to be willing to surrender that belief, to let go of the certainty that had guided her thus far. It was a terrifying thought, yet she knew it was the only way forward. With trembling hands, Leora took a step back from the gate and closed her eyes. She let go of the light, releasing the belief that had held her so steadfast. In that moment, she was not a believer or a seeker, but simply a soul standing before the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. As the last vestiges of her faith slipped from her, the gate began to tremble. The stone, once cold and unmoving, started to glow with a faint light, and the symbols carved into it shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns. The voice spoke again, but this time it was different. There was no judgment, no demand. There was only a quiet, knowing tone. "You have surrendered that which binds you," the voice said. "Now, the path is clear." The gates groaned and slowly began to open, the light within them spilling out in a flood, brighter than the sun itself. Leora stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, and as she crossed the threshold, she was engulfed in the light. For a moment, there was nothing, no time, no space, just the overwhelming presence of light. But then, slowly, the world began to take shape once more. She was no longer standing in a void, but in a vast, open landscape, unlike any she had ever seen before. The sky above was a deep shade of purple, dotted with stars that seemed to shimmer with a strange, otherworldly glow. The ground beneath her feet was soft and golden, like sand but with a warmth that radiated through her. The air was thick with the scent of flowers, but not flowers she recognized. They were strange, foreign, yet beautiful, their colors shifting and changing with every passing moment. Leora stood in awe, her gaze sweeping across the landscape. This was no ordinary realm. It was a place beyond the limits of mortal understanding, a place that existed outside of time and space, where the very essence of life seemed to pulse with energy. As she took a step forward, the ground beneath her feet seemed to respond, shifting and moving in rhythm with her. It was as if the landscape itself were alive, reacting to her presence. And then, as if summoned by her thoughts, a figure appeared before her, a tall, regal being with wings that shimmered like the stars. Its eyes were a piercing blue, full of wisdom and knowledge beyond anything Leora could comprehend. "You have arrived," the figure said, its voice echoing like the ringing of a bell. Leora felt a shiver run down her spine. She had crossed the threshold. She had entered the realm of the Guardians. And now, her journey was far from over. This was only the beginning. Chapter 13, The Guardian's Realm. The figure before Leora was unlike anything she had ever seen. A being of light and grace, standing tall with wings that seemed to stretch endlessly, as though they could embrace the entire sky. Its presence radiated power and peace in equal measure, the very air around it pulsing with an energy that made her skin tingle. Yet, despite its grandeur, there was something calming about the figure, as if it were a guiding force rather than a force of intimidation. "You have crossed into the realm of the Guardians," the figure said, its voice resonating through Leora's very soul. It was not merely heard, but felt deep within her, like the vibration of an ancient song. Leora stood still, her heart racing. "The Guardians?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The words felt strange on her tongue, as if they were part of a language she had always known but had forgotten. "Where am I?" The figure tilted its head, as if considering her question carefully. "You are in the space between worlds, the realm where the Guardians reside, beyond the veil that separates the mortal from the divine. It is here that the eternal truths of the universe are kept, hidden from those who are not ready to see." Leora's eyes widened. "And I am here because—" The question hung in the air, full of uncertainty. She had crossed the threshold, but now that she was here, she wasn't sure what to expect or what was expected of her. "You are here because you have proven yourself worthy," the Guardian replied. "Through the trials you have faced, you have earned the right to stand before us. But the journey you seek is not one of simple answers. It is one of deeper understanding, of awakening the truths that lie dormant within you." Leora nodded, trying to grasp the enormity of what was unfolding. The Guardians, those mysterious protectors who had watched over the balance of light and darkness, were not just protectors. They were keepers of knowledge, of wisdom far beyond anything she had ever imagined. "Will you help me understand?" Leora asked, her voice soft but filled with determination. The Guardian's gaze softened, and it stepped closer to her. "We are not here to give you answers, but to guide you toward finding them yourself. The path you walk is one of self-discovery. You will come to learn that all the answers you seek are already within you, waiting to be uncovered." The words echoed in Leora's mind, and she felt a profound sense of realization. She had always believed that the answers to her questions lay in the external world, in the angels, in the visions, in the trials she had faced. But now, standing before the Guardian, she understood that the true journey was not one of seeking knowledge from others, but of looking within herself. The Guardian extended a hand, and as it did, a burst of light filled the air, revealing a path that stretched out before her. The light was not harsh or blinding, but warm and inviting, illuminating the way forward. "Follow the path," the Guardian said. "It will lead you to the next trial, the next step in your journey. But remember this, the light is not always what it seems. It will test your heart, your resolve, and your very being." Leora felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. The trials had been difficult enough, but now she understood that the real challenge had only just begun. There would be no simple answers, no clear directions. The path would twist and turn, and she would be forced to confront parts of herself she had not yet understood. But she had come this far. She had faced the darkness within, and she had embraced the light. She would not falter now. Taking a deep breath, Leora stepped onto the path, the light guiding her every step. The Guardian watched her, its presence a silent support, a reminder that she was not alone. As Leora walked, the world around her began to shift. The landscape transformed, changing from the golden sands and violet skies to a forest filled with towering trees whose leaves shimmered like silver. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the ground beneath her feet was soft with moss. The further she walked, the more the forest seemed to come alive. The trees whispered to her, their voices a soft rustling in the breeze, as if they recognized her presence. She could feel their energy, their ancient wisdom, swirling around her. The path seemed to open up before her, leading deeper into the heart of the forest. But as she walked, she began to notice that the trees were not the only things that moved. Shadows flitted at the edges of her vision, figures that seemed to watch her from the dark corners of the forest. She could feel their eyes on her, and a chill ran down her spine. She had crossed into a place where not all was as it seemed, where the line between light and shadow was blurred. She quickened her pace, but the shadows seemed to follow her, always just out of sight. The whispers of the trees grew louder, almost as if they were urging her forward. Leora felt a pull in her chest, a strange compulsion to move faster. The path ahead grew darker, the light from the Guardian's realm fading as she ventured deeper into the forest. The shadows grew longer, their forms more defined, until she could see the faces of those who dwelled within them. Faces of sorrow, of longing, of pain. "Who are you?" Leora called, her voice trembling. The shadows did not answer, but their presence pressed in on her, heavy and suffocating. She continued to walk, her every step measured, as if she were walking through a dream. The trees began to thin, and soon she found herself standing at the edge of a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a large stone altar, covered in ancient runes that pulsed with an eerie light. Leora approached the altar cautiously, her eyes scanning the runes. They seemed to be calling to her, their energy resonating with something deep within her. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, the burden of those who had come before her, the burden of their choices and sacrifices. And then, as if summoned by her presence, a figure appeared before her. It was tall and cloaked in shadow, its face obscured by a hood. But Leora could feel its presence, its power, its darkness. "You have come," the figure said, its voice a low, rasping whisper. "But are you truly ready for what lies ahead?" Leora steeled herself, her heart steady despite the fear that swelled within her. "I am ready," she said, her voice unwavering. "I will face whatever comes." The figure stepped forward, its cloak swirling like smoke. "Then you must make a choice," it said, its voice cold as ice. "Choose wisely, for it will shape the fate of all who walk the path." Leora's breath caught in her throat. The choice. What choice did she have to make? The figure extended a hand, pointing toward two paths that lay ahead, one bathed in light, the other cloaked in shadow. "Choose," the figure said, its voice echoing through the clearing. "The light or the shadow?" Leora's heart pounded in her chest as she gazed at the two paths. The light beckoned her, warm and familiar, but the shadow called to something deeper, something primal within her. The decision was hers, and it would shape everything that came after. Chapter 14. The Choice. Leora stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, her mind racing as her gaze shifted between the two paths. The air around her seemed to hold its breath, the silence heavy and oppressive. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, echoing in her ears, drowning out the whispers of the trees and the faint rustling of the wind. She was not just standing at a physical crossroads. This was a moment that would define her soul, a choice that would shape her very existence. The path bathed in light seemed inviting, its golden glow radiating warmth and reassurance. It promised safety, peace, and perhaps an end to her journey, a return to the clarity she had found when she first embraced the light. But something within her, something deeper than fear, whispered that the light alone was not enough. She had already walked that path once. Had she truly learned everything she needed from it? The other path, cloaked in shadow, beckoned with a quiet intensity. It was dark but not empty, The shadows seemed to move, to whisper, as though they were alive with secrets waiting to be discovered. Leora felt the pull of the unknown, the thrill of mystery that this path offered. But there was danger in its depths. Darkness was not to be taken lightly. Yet, could it be that the shadow held the key to her true understanding? Could it be the very thing that would reveal the final truths she had been seeking? The figure before her, cloaked in shadow itself, remained silent, its eyes hidden beneath the hood. The choice, it seemed, was hers alone to make. The figure's presence was imposing, but it did not press her. It was merely a guide, a silent witness to her decision. What happens if I choose the wrong path? Leora asked, her voice barely a whisper, her throat dry with uncertainty. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering her question. There is no wrong path, it replied, its voice low and soothing. There is only the path that will lead you to where you must go. There is only the journey that will reveal who you truly are. Leora's mind raced. No wrong path. Was that even possible? She had always believed that choices were bound by consequences. Some paths led to salvation, others to destruction. But this was different. This was not just a choice between two physical directions. It was a choice between two parts of herself, two truths that had always existed but had never fully been acknowledged. She thought of the angels, of the fallen ones, of the guardians who protected the souls of the living and the dead. They, too, had faced choices that had led them to either redemption or ruin. But what her own choice? What would it mean for her? And how would it shape the fate of those she had come to care about, those she had been seeking to protect? Leora's eyes moved from the glowing path of light to the dark, mysterious path before her. She could feel her heart tugging in both directions, torn between the comfort of the light and the allure of the shadow. She knew deep down that there was something in the darkness that she had to face, something she had been avoiding her entire life. The light had brought her clarity, but it had not brought her the full understanding she sought. She had embraced the light, but now she needed to embrace the shadow. With a deep breath, Leora stepped forward, moving toward the shadowed path. As her foot touched the ground, the shadows seemed to part, as if welcoming her, and a cool, tingling energy flowed through her, sending shivers down her spine. She could feel the weight of the decision settle into her bones. But it was not fear that gripped her now. It was a deep, knowing certainty. This was the path she had to take. The figure watched her, its face hidden in the darkness, but Leora could feel its gaze upon her. For a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake, if she had chosen unwisely. But then, the figure spoke again, its voice calm and sure. Your choice is yours alone, it said. The light and the shadow are not enemies. They are two sides of the same coin. To understand one, you must understand the other. The truth lies in the balance between them. Leora nodded, absorbing the figure's words. The balance. The light and the shadow. They were both necessary, both integral parts of the whole. She had been running from the darkness, but it was time to face it. Only then could she fully understand the light. As she stepped deeper into the shadowed path, the air grew cooler, and the ground beneath her feet became uneven. The forest around her shifted, the trees growing taller and more imposing, their branches twisting and reaching toward the sky like dark, skeletal arms. The whispering shadows surrounded her once more, but now, instead of fear, she felt a strange comfort in their presence. It was as if they were guiding her, urging her onward. The path ahead was shrouded in mist, and Leora could barely make out the shapes ahead. But she did not hesitate. She continued to walk, her senses heightened, her mind alert to every sound, every movement. The further she walked, the more she began to notice details she hadn't seen before. The way the shadows seemed to pulse with life, the way the mist swirled around her like a living thing. She could hear whispers now, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from all around her. The words were fleeting, but they felt familiar, as if they were speaking directly to her heart. She strained to catch them, but the whispers always seemed just out of reach. And then, as if the forest itself were opening to her, the mist began to part. In the distance, she saw a faint glow, a light, but not the golden warmth of the path she had left behind. This was a cool, pale light, the kind that shone from the stars above. It was the light of mystery, the light of the unknown. Leora's heart raced as she approached it, feeling the pull of it as strongly as she had felt the pull of the Guardian's realm. She was close now, so close to understanding what lay at the heart of the shadow, at the core of the mystery she had been seeking. As she reached the source of the light, she found herself standing before an ancient stone archway, covered in runes that glowed softly in the dark. The archway seemed to shimmer with a strange, otherworldly energy, and Leora could feel the weight of its power pressing down on her. The whispers grew louder now, and, as she stepped toward the archway, she felt a wave of emotion sweep over her. The shadow had always been a part of her, a part she had feared and rejected. But now she understood. It was not something to be feared. It was a part of her, a part of all things, and it held the key to unlocking the full truth. Leora stepped through the archway, the mist swirling around her as she entered a new realm. The world beyond was like nothing she had ever seen. It was a place of contrasts, light and shadow intertwined, coexisting in harmony. The trees here were both light and dark, their leaves shimmering with both golden and silvery hues. The sky above was an ever-shifting tapestry of colors, blending the light of the stars with the shadows of the night. And in the center of it all stood a figure, a being of light and shadow, neither one nor the other, but both in perfect balance. It was the Guardian, but it was also something more, something older. "You have come," the figure said, its voice both gentle and firm. "And now, you must learn to balance the light and the shadow within you. Only then will you fully understand your true purpose." Leora took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the truth settle within her. The journey was not over. It had only just begun. Chapter 15, The Path of Balance. Leora stood before the figure, her mind swirling with questions. The figure, an embodiment of both light and shadow, was not what she had expected. It was neither comforting nor terrifying, neither kind nor harsh. It was simply a presence, vast and ancient, carrying within it the wisdom of ages. "You have walked the path of the Guardians," the figure said, its voice like the resonance of a distant bell, clear and echoing through the vastness of the realm. "And now you stand at the crossroads of your soul. The path you take from here will shape the very fabric of your existence." Leora's heart raced. She had come so far, yet the answers she sought still felt like elusive stars, shining far away, just beyond her reach. "I don't understand," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What do you mean? What path am I supposed to take now?" The figure regarded her for a moment, its glowing eyes softening with an ancient knowing. "The path you seek is not one of light or darkness alone. It is a path that demands the harmony between both. You have learned of the light and embraced it. You have confronted the shadow and come to understand its presence. But now, you must learn to walk with them, to hold both within you and allow them to guide you toward your true purpose." Leora's brow furrowed. "But how? How do I balance them? I don't even know where to begin." The figure extended a hand toward her, and the space around her shimmered with light and shadow, merging into a beautiful, intricate dance. "The balance you seek is not found through force or through rejection. It is found by accepting both aspects of yourself, by understanding that neither light nor shadow exists without the other. They are two sides of the same coin, and only together can they reveal the fullness of truth." As the figure spoke, Leora felt a surge of energy course through her. It was as if the entire universe was shifting, realigning itself within her. She could feel the light within her, warm and comforting, and she could feel the shadow, cool and mysterious, both dancing through her veins, both singing their own song. It was a strange sensation, an unfamiliar, yet undeniable harmony. "But what does this mean for me?" Leora asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid to break the fragile peace she was feeling. "How do I use this knowledge?" The figure's gaze softened. Your purpose is not to conquer one over the other, but to integrate them into the world. You will become a bridge, a living representation of the balance between light and shadow. Through you, others will come to understand that they too carry both within them. And when they accept this truth, they will walk their own path of balance. The figure paused, and Leora felt a momentary shift in the air, as if time itself had stopped. But this is not an easy journey. There will be trials ahead, and you will be tested as you have been tested before. The world will challenge you, and it will seek to pull you in one direction or the other. But remember, true strength lies in balance. You will be called upon to make choices, to stand firm in your understanding, even when the world around you seems chaotic. Leora nodded slowly, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. She had faced so much already, had walked through darkness, embraced the light, and now stood before this ancient being, learning that her true journey was just beginning. The balance of light and shadow was not something to fear. It was something to embrace, something that would guide her toward her destiny. "Are you ready?" the figure asked, its voice deep and resonant, vibrating in Leora's very being. Leora's breath caught in her throat. Was she ready? Could anyone truly be ready for the burden of balance, of carrying both light and shadow within them? She looked deep within herself, searching for the strength that had carried her this far, the courage that had allowed her to face the darkness, and the clarity that had led her toward the light. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady and determined. "Yes, I am ready." The figure nodded, and for the first time it smiled, a soft, knowing smile that seemed to encompass all the ages of time. "Then go forth, Leora. The path before you will not be easy, but you will not walk it alone. We, the Guardians, are with you. The light and the shadow are with you. And in time, you will understand that you are not separate from them. You are one with them." As the figure spoke, the realm around Leora began to shift once more. The trees in the mist seemed to dissolve, leaving behind only a vast, infinite sky filled with stars. The ground beneath her feet was firm and unyielding, a path stretching before her, bathed in the soft, gentle glow of twilight. Leora took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The path was not clear, but it was hers to walk. The road ahead was uncertain, and she could not see the end. But for the first time, she felt at peace with that uncertainty. The light and the shadow had become part of her. She was no longer afraid to walk between them. She was ready to embrace the fullness of both. And so, with each step she took, Leora began to walk the path of balance, knowing that the Guardians, both of light and shadow, were watching over her. Her journey was far from over, but she was no longer alone. She was a part of something greater, something eternal. And in that realization, she found a peace she had never known. Epilogue: The Guardian's Legacy. The stars above flickered like the eternal flame of wisdom, a beacon for all those who sought truth. In the distance, the soft rustling of the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the knowledge of the ages. Leora had walked the path of balance, and now she stood at the threshold of a new beginning. The journey was not without its challenges, but she had come to understand that true strength came from embracing both light and shadow. Each trial, each choice had led her closer to the understanding that all beings, all souls, were interconnected in this grand, cosmic dance. And as she stood there at the edge of the realm between worlds, Leora knew that her role as a bridge, as a guide, had only just begun. The Guardians, the protectors of souls, had entrusted her with their legacy. She would carry it forward, sharing the wisdom of balance with those who came after her. For in the end, it was not the light nor the shadow alone that defined her. It was the harmonious balance between them, the understanding that both were necessary, both were beautiful, and both were part of the divine plan. And as Leora stepped into the world once more, she did so with a heart full of courage, a spirit full of wisdom, and a soul ready to face whatever lay ahead. For she had learned that the greatest protection, the greatest strength, came not from avoiding the darkness, but from embracing it as a part of the light. The journey of the Guardian had only just begun.